So let's move on to the next piece, which is reviewing the pass optimal lineups, which starts in 2018. So I'm just going to kind of rapid fire through these. Your optimal lineup in 2018 left $2,200 on the table. And it started with a 9K golfer with Jason Day, dropped down to an $8,700 golfer in Tony Finau, and then we had 4 7K golfers in between. So very interesting take. Now, a more realistic optimal lineup would be removing Tony Finau at 8,700 and inserting Justin Rose at 10,600. That gets our salary up to 49,700. So again, we go with 110, a 9, and 4 7s, or really we could just start in the 9, go to an 8, and still have 4 7s. But leaving that much money on the table, not extremely realistic. Moving on to 2019, our optimal lineup actually only left $200 on the table. And that consisted of Justin Rose at $10,800, Gary Woodland at $9,000, Hideki Matsuyama at $8,000, Adam Scott at $7,500, Billy Horschel at $77,000, and Taylor Gooch at $68,000. So this is that 10-9-8-7-7-6 model that I, advocate week in and week out. That was your optimal lineup. Now your GPP winning lineup actually, you would remove Woodland at 9, you would remove Gooch at 6,800, and you would insert Ryan Palmer at 7, and also Brandt Snedeker, who finished 62nd place at $8,400. So to review that salary structure, you'd actually go with the 10, 2 8s, and 3 7s. That is a more conservative approach, and that obviously won a GPP back in 2019. So it's definitely a way to build lineups, and it still follows my strategy where you start with the 10-9-8-7-7-6 format, and you can make 2 substitutions. So quite literally what they did here was they start with a 10K golfer. They skipped the 9K range and they actually traded down. So they went from a 9K to another 8K. So now they have a 10 and 2 8s. Well, then they actually traded up from a 6K to a 7K. So those are your 2 substitutions you can make. It works out just fine. So that was a 10-8-8 and then 3 7s. Or you just follow the 10-9-8-7-7-6 model in 2019 and you'd come across the optimal lineup that way. So again, I advocate for that, and I will continue to do that. Going to 2020, we actually had 3 different types of lineups. I have a Sweet Spot Optimal that follows the Sweet Spot model, and I have an optimal lineup as well as a GPP winning lineup. Your optimal lineup in 2020 started with John Rahm at 11,300, and then we had 2 8K golfers, both in Mark Leishman at 83 and Brandt Snedeker at 8,400, Bubba Watson at 75, and Charlie Hoffman at 6,600. Sorry, one more, Cameron Champ. So this one went 10K and above, so 10K, 2 8s, 2 7s, and a 6. So another interesting way to build a lineup. It still follows the 10-9-8-7-7-6 and makes a couple substitutions. I think it just makes 1. Goes from a 9 down to an 8. And that's because John Rahm is 11,300. Now, if he was in the 10K range, maybe you could get up to a Tony Finau at $9,300. But obviously, too much salary used, can't do that. Now, the Sweet Spot Optimal, which I think during this year was just including all golfers that finished inside the top 10, because obviously one of the optimal lineup guys finished in 16th place, was going 11, 2 8s, a 7, and 2 6s. So another interesting way to build a lineup, but leaving $1,000 on the table, that's kind of difficult to do. Still, it worked out. Your GPP winning lineup, however, use 11, 9, 8, 7, 7, 6. So again, starting 10-9-8, 7-7-6, that's how the GPP, that's how the user won a GPP following that strategy structure. In 2021, our optimal lineup left $500 on the table, and our GPP winning lineup left $100 on the table. Now, your optimal started with a 10K golfer, 9, 8, 8, 6, 6, which is extremely interesting. Again, still following the 10-9-8-7-7-6 model, but subbing up 1-7 to a 6 and then subbing the other 7 down to another 6. That's how I would look at this. So, hey, again, each of these lineups are already starting with a 10K, except for the 1 year, but you still would insert a 10K to get a more realistic lineup. Because I think that one, you know, leaving $2,200 on the table in 2018 wasn't the way to go. But you know, if you were to use a more realistic lineup, you still start with Justin Rose at 10,600. So keep that in mind. Now your GPP winning lineup during that year, also again, use a 10, goes 10, 9, 8, 2 8s again, a 6, and a 7, a low 7K golfer. So to repeat that, that was a 10, 9, 8, 8, 7, 6 start when building lineups. So you're already kind of seeing like double 8s, and the kind of interesting. I don't like the 8K range this week. We'll get into that a little bit later, but hey, this might be a time to do it. And if you needed a reason to play Jon Rahm at his $11,600 price tag, seeing how many 8Ks, you know, are in the optimal lineup or a GPP winning lineup over the last few years at this event, I should say, kind of gives you reason to play Jon Rahm this week. Okay, so the last year, 2022, optimal lineup left $1,000 on the table. Probably not super easy to get to. But of course, we start with a 10, we go down to a 9, and then it's a 7, 7, 7, 6. So 10, 9, 3 7s, and a 6. So again, still follows that 10, 9, 8, 7, 7, 6 model. Your GPP winning lineup, well, let me just actually go back to the Sweet Spot Optimal. So Sweet Spot Optimal, we would actually remove just a 7K to another 7K to get a better, like a closer salary to the salary cap. So instead of leaving $1,000 on the table, we leave $100 on the table. It doesn't change anything. Still is a 10, 9, 3 7s, and a 6. Your GPP winning lineup was a 10, 9, 7, 7, 7, 6. So again, same thing. But it's still, again, I mean, you kind of see it every single year here at the Farmers Insurance Open. I already heard a couple podcasts this week talk about how they don't want to go to the 6K range, but I'm sorry. Have we not gone over most of these GPP winning lineups as well as these optimal lineups having a 6K golfer in it? Like, very rarely do you not have a 6K golfer in either one of the lineups. So again, I think you still want to target a 6K golfer. Don't fall in love with one. That's always been my piece of advice. Don't fall in love with the 6K range. Just pick a golfer at random. Keep your exposures less than 5%, and I think you're going to be just fine. So if you make 10 lineups, have 10 unique 6K golfers in your lineup, and I think you'll have a better chance of winning GPP doing it that way than just only having 7K golfers. You know, not, or I should say this, having the absence of a 6K golfer in your lineup. So I think you start with the 10K. I also think you put a 6K, and then just fill it in with whatever works for you. I think that's a good way to do it. And again, we follow the 10, 9, 8, 7, 7, 6 and make 2 substitutions. And that's it. Very rarely are you going to have 3 8K golfers in an optimal winning lineup. Very rarely you're going to have 3 9K golfers in an optimal lineup. So, you know, maybe stay away from something like that. But you could go from a 10 down to a 9, have 2 9s, an 8, maybe have 3 7s. Maybe you have a 9, 9, 8, 8. 2 7s and a 6. You could do something like that. No, you can't do that. 9, 9, 8, 8, a 7 and a 6, or maybe just 2 7s. Maybe that works if the salary allows it. Either way, I think you still start with a 10K golfer because we see it inside the optimal, or you see it in the optimal lineup or the GPP winning lineup every single week.